Yeah, but uh, anyway, that's not all that we dealt with this week. As I was saying, the media has sort of put down the story about Gaza, mostly because there's really no way that you can make Israel out to be anything but the villain in this story. The entire world is running away from Israel at this point. Countless countries have shut off flights to Israel. They are stopping. They are no longer doing business. Plenty of countries are boycotting Israel for what is out and out ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people. And just this week, the Israeli military targeted refugee shelters in the Shujalaya neighborhood of Gaza City, resulting in numerous casualties, including children. These attacks have sparked international condemnation and calls for an immediate ceasefire. This conflict has been going on for 300 days with reports of widespread violence and displacement. They are not just bombing Gaza anymore. They are bombing Lebanon. They killed an entire Syrian family. 5 Syrian civilians, including a woman and her 3 children. Their last assault in Lebanon wounded several Lebanese and Syrian civilians. Now, this incident occurred while Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was delivering a speech, and the IDF did not immediately comment on this strike. This attack has also sparked international condemnation. As well, they just assassinated Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Iran, with an explosive device. Now, mind you, Iran is a nuclear power. Iran is strapped. Iran is not messing around here, folks. They are a big country of 80-something million people who have people who are ready to fight and die. And somehow Israel thought it was a good idea to infiltrate Iran and kill Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh with an explosive device that was placed in a guest house just 2 months earlier. The bomb was detonated remotely after his presence was confirmed. Now, it'd be easy to say, well, you know, he was a Hamas leader, so obviously he deserved it for being a part of a terrorist organization. But as I've told you guys before, Benjamin Netanyahu actually funded Hamas. The United States and Israel is why Hamas even has the power that they have in Gaza. People don't even know that. You got to read Israel's newspapers to find that out, because ours, somehow, you're less able to be critical of Israel in American newspapers than you can be critical of Israel in Israel's newspapers. If you read Haaretz, which is the Israeli newspaper, you can actually see a lot of these things, like Netanyahu funding Hamas, sending suitcases full of cash to Hamas. So no, he wasn't killed just for being a part of a terrorist organization or for being a part of Hamas. Ismail Haniyeh was killed because he was one of the leading voices for a ceasefire, and he was negotiating a ceasefire. And Benjamin Netanyahu does not want a ceasefire, because Benjamin Netanyahu wants this war, or I guess we can just say now this genocide, to continue to go on indefinitely. Because when it's over, the Israeli people are going to start looking at him like they were before it started and be looking to put him in jail because he is corrupt. And so he's doing what George W. Bush did back about 20 years ago, keeping the public distracted with a war. And so he has no desire to negotiate. He has no desire to end this conflict, which is really just a genocide, a complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people at this point. But just so you know, Iran is definitely not going to take this laying down. They are not going to take Haniya's assassination or Israel infiltrating their country to do what they did laying down. They have actually officially notified the United Nations that they intend to carry out a retaliatory strike against Israel in self-defense, citing Article 51 of the UN Charter. These attacks are expected to be larger in scope than the April 13th attack, potentially involving proxies like Hezbollah. Here we go, loop-de-loo. Here we go, Hezbollah. You do not want to mess with Hezbollah. The Biden administration is preparing to counter the anticipated Iranian retaliation, which is expected to be similar to the drone attack on April 13th, but at a larger scale. So Israel's actually trying to pull us into a regional war with Iran, which in itself could trigger World War III. As if we weren't already close to triggering World War III, fighting with the Russians in Ukraine, and possibly triggering World War III with China over Taiwan. And this is why I always criticize a lot of you who act like the Democrats and Joe Biden and this administration have been the mature people in the room. That is not the case. We are much closer to obsolescence as a people, as a species, right now than we were 4 years ago when COVID-19 started. That's a fact. Iran, China, Russia, these are all some of the most powerful countries on the planet. You cannot fight all of these people, and definitely not at once. But it is Joe Biden's consistent and insatiable desire to enable Israel that got us in this situation right here. Because now we are finally getting a scope of just how large this genocide on the Palestinian people are. The Lancet, which is maybe the most respected medical journal on the planet, say they are applying a conservative estimate of 4 indirect deaths per 1 direct death due to the 37,000 deaths that are reported. And they are estimating that a conservative death toll on the Gaza Strip is 186,000 people. Almost 200,000 people. That is a conservative estimate. Now, this is a conservative estimate because past conflicts, the ratio of direct deaths to indirect deaths has been up to 15. So they could have used a ratio of 15 deaths per indirect deaths for each individual death. Instead, they just said, let's use 4. And that's how they got to 186,000. We don't even want to try to do the math if it was 15 indirect deaths for every direct death. Even with the conservative estimate, that is 8% of Gaza's population that has been killed in this conflict. 8%. That would be about the equivalent of almost 30 million people dying in a conflict in the United States. Think about that. Think about a conflict killing almost 30 million Americans. And you are starting to see the scale of which this genocide is taking place against the Palestinian people who have no military. Remember, they are not they're not a full country. Hamas is just some guys who are like, we're sick of being here, stuck here. And, you know, they're basically a paramilitary, but they're not a military. They don't have tanks. They don't have aircraft or anything. This is essentially if the United States government decided to go to war with the Gangster Disciples or the Bloods or Crips or something and started bombing Chicago to stop gangbanging. Now, these indirect deaths typically take place from famine, from sanitation. Remember, these people don't have toilets, hunger, and all the just unsanitary conditions of being in a war zone for 300 days. All of their infrastructure has collapsed. The Israeli government has denied any independent access to be able to totally assess the toll. That's how you know that they know what they're doing ain't right. Let independent people come in and see if what you're doing isn't all that bad. They immediately dismiss the death toll from Hamas and say, well, they're lying, they're Hamas, but they won't let anybody else come in to assess the death toll either. And they use, oh, October 7th, October 7th, oh, October 7th, the worst thing in the history of the world. Well, also evidence is coming now from Israel's own media. This is Plus 972 magazine, which is an Israeli magazine, that said that the Hannibal directive was used on October 7th. Now, what is the Hannibal directive? The Hannibal directive is when a military or a state says that they would rather kill their own civilians than allow them to be taken and kidnapped. So we know now, because Israel's tried to hide the evidence, that they killed a lot of their own citizens on October 7th, rather than have them be taken as hostages back to Gaza. So a lot of the death toll from October 7th that Israel and its Zionist defenders have used to try to justify ethnically cleansing an entire ethnic group off the planet, they killed a lot of their own people. They killed a lot of their own people. And we're finding out now that a lot of the hostages that Hamas took back to Gaza were members of the IDF. They were military people. "972 magazine has also said that there are reports of 6 different sources that say that IDF, Israel's defense forces, that confirmed that Israeli soldiers routinely execute Palestinian civilians simply because they entered an area of the military. They also testified, now soldiers are testifying, Israel's soldiers are testifying to a systematic policy of burning down Palestinian houses. Israel has also murdered 176 journalists from around the world in the 300 days since this conflict has been going on. They have killed 366 UN staff members. Now, this data has been put together by the UN Crisis Coordination Center and also includes a breakdown by agency, finding that 5 UN Development Program dependents, 4 UNICEF dependents, 3 World Food Program family members, 2 World Health Organization dependents have been killed, 158 dependents of staff for UNRWA, which is the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine. Refugees have also been killed. We are finding out now about the conditions that Palestinians are going through in Israeli prisons. The Washington Post spoke to former Palestinian prisoners and basically found out that it's basically Guantanamo Bay. Now, the media was very quick to tell you about all the fake rape allegations against Palestinians and against Hamas on October 7th. What they haven't told you is that right now in Israel, just this week, they had riots in Israel because some of the soldiers who've been, some of the people in the prisons who have been literally raping Palestinians, raping them with soldering irons and other tools, are being prosecuted because the whole world is starting to say, Israel, chill. You guys are doing too much now. And so they've had to just do the minimal. And just because they did the minimal to try to stop these soldiers and people in the prisons from raping Palestinians, they are having riots from the population. Rights groups are saying that Israel's prisons have deteriorated since October 7th. The prisoners describe routine beatings, often carried out on whole cells or sections, usually with batons, sometimes with dogs. They are denied sufficient food and medical care and are often subjected to psychological as well as physical abuse. The Washington Post spoke to 11 former prisoners and half a dozen lawyers and examined court records and reviewed autopsy reports, and they found that rampant, deadly violence and deprivation is being enacted on the population, on the prisoners by Israeli prison authorities. Now, a lot of these people haven't been convicted of anything. They're just Palestinians. They just could be regular people. There was one guy who just posted something on social media, and they came and arrested him and denied him his medicine and his special diet that he needed, and his stomach exploded just for writing on something on social media against Israel. And this is why the International Criminal Court is considering arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over what they are doing in Gaza. These conditions in their jails could lead to even more international action, legal action. Their prison system is built for 500 inmates and is housing at least 21,000, I'm sorry. 21,000 in a place meant for 14,000. And that's not even including the 3,000 detainees they got from Gaza that are held in military facilities. Now, the far right in Israel, who are the ones most adamant about this genocide that's taking place, they are not backing down. Ben-Gvir, who is their far-right national security minister, boasted on Twitter this month that he had dramatically reduced shower time and introduced a minimal menu. Israeli sources are now confirming that CNN and New York Times reports of the conditions in the prisons include things like electric shock, amputations due to bad conditions, severe beatings, surgery without anesthesia, and playing loud music until inmates' ears bleed. There are deaths due to bad sanitary conditions, systematic torture, and sexual abuse. Sources in the Israeli Justice Department are saying that the evidence is so clear and the cases are so severe that it will be an open and shut case for the international criminal courts. And I hope that is indeed the case. I hope that is indeed the case. In response to this, as I said earlier, a lot of airlines are halting flights to Israel. Delta, United, Lufthansa are canceling flights to and from Tel Aviv, Israel, due to security concerns and increased security measures. This is one of the worst crimes. This is probably the worst genocide post-World War II that we have seen. And you better not believe that the irony is not lost on me, that the very same people who were the victims of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis are now carrying out a very, very similar genocide in an attempt to ethnically cleanse an entire ethnic group full of people. And our government, the United States government, who always bragged about being on the right side of World War II and stopping Hitler, this time we're enabling Hitler. And our president and our vice president, and even the guy running against our vice president, they're all Zionists. All of them. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The only person who is not an avowed Zionist and is not supporting what is going on in Israel right now, in Gaza right now, is Jill Stein. The Jew. The only one not going along with this is the Jewish woman who has the courage to stand up and not support this. And that's why I'm proud that I supported her in 2016, and that's why I'm proud that I support her now. Because she has the guts to not be for this. When so many people in our political system and our media is literally allowing an entire ethnic group to be exterminated off the planet of the earth. All right, folks, let's lighten the mood a little bit when we come back. Happy Abbies! Be right back after these on Straight Out of the Cannon with me, Scott Cannon. Don't go nowhere.